this conversation. It's the eve of our, independence commemoration. I know, Andrew, I don't want to say Independence Day because they will shoot back and say there is no country called Uganda. But tomorrow we will mark something. So in a special way, I want to welcome the panelists. So Benson, Ekwee, all the way from Eastern Uganda, the land of the whites. Andrew Karamaji, of course, doesn't need introduction. Otherwise, I will take you to some papers which he grabbed at some point. But that is Andrew Karamaji, doesn't need introduction. Our dear Winnie Kiiza, an excellent leader of opposition, and she has taken a step back from platform politics and doing a different kind of politics at the moment. So you're welcome. She's logging in from outside of Uganda. So we are happy to see you online. The country where you come from, internet is very unstable. So we hope we will keep you as much as we can. And then we have Mercy Munduru. We were sharing solidarity with Mercy in the last 2 months for the bereavement of our dear dad, but happy to see you, Mercy, as bright as always. I will not mention the football team you support. This is not allowed by CCG. We are not going to market Onduparaka here, but that is, I thought I would avoid that word, but it's impossible. Thanks a lot for that. And then, of course, there is a name called Andrew Karamaji, but it is really Peter Kamelingin, who is also one of the contributors to this particular report that we will be speaking to shortly. So you're all welcome. Fred Muhumuza, like I said, is going to join us in the next 15 minutes. So without any further delay, since time is not something we can negotiate with, I would like to just introduce a few ground rules. Number one, if you're not speaking, if you can mute, that would be excellent so that we avoid any echoes. Number two, we will try to use the chat room as much as possible, and Rita will be drawing my attention to questions that might be emerging so that panelists can just focus also on what they have to deliver. Number three, I would request each and every panelist really to make sure that you stick to the time that I've already shared. So if it's 2 minutes, let it be 2 minutes. I don't want to have the autocratic tendency of having to shut you down or shout at you. So let's abide by the time just so that we manage this within the time frame agreed. Also because Civic TV, which is also hosting us today, will be moving on to another event. So we really must finish by 1 o'clock. So those are the simple ground rules that I wanted to introduce. And we will, without any further delay, just move straight then to the program that I've just explained. So I would like to, at this moment, invite Peter Kamelingin, who is calling in from the headquarters of the African Union. So he will take us through briefly what this particular publication that we are virtually launching today is about, and just some key points that, key messages that the authors would like to share to the Ugandan public, but also friends of Uganda. The idea behind this particular publication is to start a really delicate but very important conversation that Ugandans and friends of Ugandans need to have. So let me not preempt everything that Peter is supposed to tell us. So over to you, Peter. You have about 8 minutes to tell us very briefly what this publication is about and why we should pay attention to it. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arthur, and greetings from Addis Ababa. I think the name was supposed to be Andrew Kamelingin. I think there was a typing error there. Thank you very much for that, and I really appreciate the panelists also for making time, and to all the good people of Uganda for showing up at a very short notice, as I know. As Arthur has said, my name is Peter Kamelingin, and I'm one of the members of a loose group called Narrative Uganda. It's a network of Ugandans living and working in and out of Uganda. They are patriotic people who love their country, who love their country. It's not a political party. Let me be clear about that. It is not an NGO. It's not a business. It's just a group, a bunch of people who genuinely wish Uganda well, and they are keen to celebrate their Ugandanness. They are concerned about the type and form of the country or a nation that we mold, aware that it is always work in progress. Somebody says it's not Uganda. Uganda is still forming, so it's still work in progress. Now, we are launching some thinking pieces. Let me say something about the whys of that. That group that I call the loose network of people who want to shape positive narratives for Uganda's future, observe that many of our political discourses have overly focused on leadership change, more than what would happen when the time to transit arrives. However it arrives, because inevitably it will. We were conscious of where the country was or even is at the moment, where the COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant socioeconomic challenges that have followed that, the increasing inequalities and challenges that we really sought to imagine and simulate that future. We believe that the best way to prepare for a future, bad or good, is to simulate, to imagine it, and to talk about it, to have dialogue about it. That is the only way you will increase first chances of maximizing the opportunities that transition brings, but also most importantly, to mitigate against any threats it may inevitably present, because changes can be positive, they can also be negative. But you've got to be prepared to maximize the opportunities that change brings, but also to mitigate any threats or negatives that may present. And that is true for people who do humanitarian work or even in the military strategy. We call it the contingency planning. So we thought that this is an important thing, to just have that conversation as a way of preparing to seize the opportunities and to manage the threats. Now, there are some think pieces that have been prepared, the reflective think pieces really. They are not research documents, they're just reflective things based on observations and conversations with different people. Those are the pieces that we think today. They are in fact starters of what I have called the simulation, that preparedness. And the initial set of them cover about 3 areas. And these include first, the agency of leadership. It seeks to unpack the leadership and character traits of the man who has been at the helm of Uganda's leadership for the last, now I think, more than 35 years. And 35 years out of 29 years is significant. You can't wish the man away, and there's much to learn from him. So leadership is critical. That's what that critical think piece is looking at. Secondly, we also look at the scenarios for political transition in Uganda. What are the options that confront us? Will it be a peaceful transition? We hope it is. We should do everything to make sure it is. It could also be chaotic or actually a mix of both. That is what the paper seeks to suggest. And of course, the possible implications of each of those scenarios. And as a result of what we do, if either of those manifest. Thirdly, we look at rebuilding conscience of the people and society of Uganda. It looks at moral values. This started from our own observed brokenness of values across society. Those of us who know what is happening in the country, it's very difficult to get trusted people, and it's becoming a norm now. And if somebody haven't said, oh, that is Uganda, you send relatives to do anything in the farm, they celebrate. It's just observations. This paper is underpinned by an understanding that really culture drives politics. It is not politics which drives culture. This is something that is important. A lot of the issues we are having to face with, whether it is corruption or lack of transparency, whatever it is because our culture needs to change. And that's the only way the quality of our politics, our governance will change. And we have to really make some investments there. And if you doubted that, you need to understand that people like Donald Trump actually understand culture and identity issues, and they appeal to that, and that's why they get support. So we need to invest there. Fourthly, we also attempt to reflect and really expose some false economic solutions that have been expounded over the last few years and what that has meant in terms of the long-term stability or even efforts to build equality, a more equal, more sustainable economy. So we expose some ideas for building an economy that works for all. So there are some ideas there. Fifthly and lastly, we locate the place of Uganda in Africa, in the Great Lakes region in East Africa. So there's that piece, that thing, reflective piece, proposes ways towards what we need to do to have, so that we can have a more impactful and beneficial role of Uganda in the region. It is our hope that these pieces, these reflective think pieces, and today's discussion will facilitate and incentivize a more open, more freer, and more wider conversation as we simulate our future. It is arguably, in fact, more beneficial, especially for those who love and cherish the legacy of the leader Uganda has had for the last 35 years. And as I said, it should really be about more than just individuals. It should be about the whole of society of Uganda. So I hope that on behalf of the group that initiated this, I hope that we can use this moment to engage, even as I appreciate those good Ugandans for their initial thoughts together, on the basis of which I'm sure we will have a good conversation. I think that's what I can say for now. Over to you, Arthur. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Andrew Karamaji, Peter Kamelingin. So just to make sure that people who do not know these names, that is Peter Kamelingin from Addis. He's Ugandan, currently in Addis Ababa. So don't confuse him for Andrew Karamaji, who will be coming up shortly in the conversation. So thanks, Peter, for this overview. I would request Rita, if she's online, to just attach this particular paper onto the chat. You can just, post it on the chat, so those that are already on the call can quickly have a quick look at this particular paper that Peter has just taken us through very, very quickly. And like Peter said, this is the beginning of the conversation. It's we will not cover everything in 1 hour and 30 minutes, but for sure, we will continue to have these reflections on big issues that Peter has just overviewed for many weeks, years to come. So whether it's about this whole big question on what kind of transition Uganda will go through, it is inevitable. We will transition. The question is how and to what. So I think this is very, very important. So thanks a lot, Andrew, for posting the paper on the chat. Then the question about, understanding the person that we are supposed to transition from. It's not easy. Even if Benson had been in power in the same state house for 40 years, Benson will begin to behave differently, because State House is, it comes with a lot of paraphernalia. And I think Benson, one time you argued in a different context when we were talking about budget, that State House spends 300 million shillings per minute or per hour or whatever. If you have those kinds of resources at your disposal, you cannot be the same. So we need to know, we need to understand and appreciate why leaders act in certain ways. And I'm sure Winnie will also give us some of her reflections about leaders. So this is not an attack on anybody. It is an understanding of where our leaders find themselves in, and the comfort that sometimes gives them nightmares to think that, if it doesn't exist, then what would happen? Then, of course, the whole question about rediscovering the conscience of our people. So it's not about just corruption in the public sector, but also, pillaging of resources in burial groups, in gardening groups in the village. So it's something about rediscovering our soul as a people. And I think that's very important. Muhumuza will be taking us through this economics that works. So Muhumuza is an interesting academic, but also activist that has distinguished himself challenging dogma of economics, but being a proponent of what kind of economy will work for people. And finally, we are part of a larger context in East Africa, as well as globally. So this is what these papers are about, and we thank Peter very much for giving us a quick glance on what is in there. So I would like to move then to the second segment of our conversation, which is really going to take now about 35 to 40 minutes. And in this segment is going to be divided into two. The first segment is really going to just introduce us to this whole idea about independence, which we will be celebrating tomorrow for the 59th time since 1962. And this discussion is not about independence, because at 2 o'clock, there will be another webinar hosted by CCG that will talk more about, what does this thing mean to us. But we are in the mood of a holiday tomorrow. So I just wanted to, as an icebreaker, to start off with the panel members, just reflecting in 1 minute or so about this independence. Tomorrow will be 59 years since we symbolically raised our flag somewhere in Pololo. So I want to check with you, Mercy. What exactly should we be celebrating, and what should we be frowning about? As give us a balance sheet of what you feel as a Ugandan when we talk about independence. Over to you, Mercy, in 1 minute or so.
Thank you very much, Arthur. And I must say, first of all, that I'll speak about independence from the perspective of a young person who is living 33 years of those 56 years. So for us, the concept of independence is distorted. Apart from the scraps of history that we've come across about colonialism and the concept of independence as we see it now, our understanding of what independence is may be varied from the other generation. But I must say that whereas we celebrate our break-off or our independence from colonialism, I feel as a person that we are still in chains across different divides. We may have attained our independence then, and we have made quite some progress with regards to our democracy. But I should say, from our perspective now, there's not so much to celebrate. I can celebrate, though, at the level of civic awareness of our citizens, especially young people now, who, because of the circumstances that surround us, have decided to start defining what good governance should look like. And therefore, because of those definitions and those standards that they've set for themselves for what the country called Uganda should ordinarily look like, despite the circumstances under which we are in, I want to celebrate that level of civic awareness. I also will celebrate the fact that as we move along, our citizens are embracing non-conventional means of defining what their country should look like. And for me, that's a good thing to celebrate, that you cannot sell a certain narrative and it is accepted wholesale. There are bits and pieces that are being challenged by different sections of people. And for me, that level of awareness, that level of practice is what I celebrate. And of course, I cannot be blind to the fact that we still have certain challenges I believe that we're going to speak about along the way. The issues of corruption, the issues of tyranny will continue to haunt us, even as we commemorate these 59 years. Thank you, Arthur.
Great, thanks a lot. So there is lots to celebrate from Mercy's still in chains. So right from West Nile, where Onduparaka comes from, right to the land of Imorimor, Benson, in less than 2 minutes, what is it that might be having a technical issue? Let me move on to Andrew. You know, we are in the generation next, the generation present and next. So Andrew, just pick up from where Mercy left and tell us, what is it that we should say? At least you have a smile, Andrew. We know what will come out of your intellectual prowess, but at least that you're smiling. Is that part of our independence celebration, my brother? Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Arthur. It's just as well that I have followed my age mate, Mercy, in sharing my thoughts as a fellow young person. So for me, the frown is about the fact that our forefathers, people like Ignatius Kangave Musazi, Gracie Binjira, fantastic women like Rhoda Kalema and others, Sarah Ntiro, who were trailblazers for our self-determination, mobilized around the idea that we had a violent, extractive, and repressive state, and that if it was a state that actually cares for citizens in terms of services, in terms of everybody's children. And so painstaking work was done by these individuals, among others, to mobilize their meager resources. Teachers, cotton farmers, and all these people did a lot of work to mobilize funds and other resources to ensure that our agitation and organizing and mobilizing for self-determination was successful, which it was. The frown, therefore, is that the success was that success is that we are seemingly confirming or lending credence to the saying which goes that the more things change, the more they remain the same. We are now seized with a violent, extractive, and repressive state. If we think about our disease, we've moved some steps forward in that regard, but haven't steered clear. We're not entirely out of danger, as the novel has proved. I am also more concerned about questions of whether we military policy, our production lines, the things that actually determine the independence of our people. And on a light note, to end, I saw this on social media a few days ago, and the person who made me laugh said that there's nothing as useless as a public holiday which falls on a weekend. And if we can relate that to the Independence Day we're discussing, the context in which we're celebrating it is not just insignificant insofar as the issues that I've raised are concerned, but insignificant also because of the fact that it falls on a weekend. But I'm saying that on a lighter note. Thank you very much, Arthur, and I look forward to a great discussion with the rest of the panelists.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Let that sink, that tomorrow is a Saturday more than just Independence Day. So thanks for reminding us, Andrew. But also just the idea that we can recollect and imagine what kind of struggle some of our forefathers and mothers did, just to remember what they stood for is a big inspiration and a big challenge as well to us to say, what will be our struggle as a people today. We have the privilege and the honor of walking, the paths of Uganda, the streets of Uganda. What is it that we can do today that will, reflect the kind of struggle that our foremothers and fathers actually undertook? So let me move quickly to
Arthur, you may penalize me for this, I'm sure, but when I think about the fact that we, the great-grandchildren of those forefathers, are holding a discussion with people in Teso, people in Addis Ababa, with people in Kampala, others elsewhere, Nairobi, but the fact that those people had to walk, there was no Zoom call. If you had a message to send, you walk to Luwero or you walk to Bushenyi. But here we're just clicking buttons, and how is it possible that they did a lot more than we who have the means, just to provoke more thought? Thank you.
In other words, we can do much more. With the advancements that we have today, we have no excuse to be frowning. I think that's the point that Andrew is making. But let me move on to Honorable Winnie Kiiza. You have walked through the corridors of power, from growing from being a local politician in Kasese. You led the alternative government in parliament for a number of years. You have really interacted, and even with the person and the machinery that we are now discussing today. I understand he promised you a huge number of cows, which he has not delivered up to now. But what does independence really, what should Ugandans celebrate, and what should we be frowning about and trying to work hard to overcome? In 2 minutes time, Winnie, over to you.
Thank you, Arthur. And I first of all would like to thank the members of the narrative for having started this discussion. You know, it has been a discussion that nobody has wanted to begin. To you, the members of the narrative, I want to say congratulations. And I want to thank Sarah Bireete, the executive director of CCG, for having accorded us this platform. Like Andrew did mention, when he said we can use technology to confront the regime, we can use technology to at least do what our forefathers did. So I want to say congratulations to Uganda as a country for having attained the 59 years birthday. I know it is sad that we are here to discuss where Uganda should be going and how it should be managed. We actually should be gathering here to celebrate the achievements of the country that has lived more than a century as an independent country. But it's unfortunate that more than a century, we are still grappling with the issue of where do we go next and how do we get there? Indeed, I came into the corridors of power as a district councillor, as a member of parliament, rising to the rank of a leader of the opposition. But I can tell you throughout these processes, it has been a struggle of trying to define ourselves, trying to understand what leadership should look like, trying to get to understand where are we coming from as a country, what were the intentions of those who agitated for independence, and therefore are we still living to the intentions and aspirations of those people? I can see as Ugandans, we have let them down. Having been a member of parliament, having seen how institutions of government have all been shuttered down, having seen how a one man has decided to make a country his personal estate, I say we have nothing to celebrate as independence, because even those who will attend tomorrow's celebrations anyway, they will be treated to a drama of a political party. So we ceased to celebrate independence as a people, we go to celebrate NRM. And to me, that is not the Uganda that I think should be like it is supposed to be. When we are supposed to celebrate a national function, all Ugandans should feel it. But how can Ugandans who are chained celebrate independence? We are still taking our children for slavery in form of jobs abroad. That can't be independence. We are not considering alternative views in the same country, living under the same constitution that talks about freedoms of speech, freedoms of association, freedom of movement. We can't congregate, we can't associate, we can't freely talk. Where civil society organizations are looked at as a threat, we can't say we are independent, Arthur. So I cry my beloved country. And I want to thank once again the members of the narrative together with CCG for having brought these minds together to say, let's look for a way forward. And I look forward to this great conversation.
Great, great, great. So just two more interjections before we go to the second part of this segment, which will be really just an interesting moment to listen to what the panelists, we set this up as a draft. So let's see whether the panelists have read the report, number one. Number two is if they are actually intrigued or referring to the same text and pages, you know, because Benson all the way in Soroti would be reading the same page as Mercy in West Nile. So it would be interesting to just hear from you all what intrigued you about this report that is now free and it's circulating. So if you have a copy on WhatsApp, on email, forward it to your networks, because it's now part of the dissemination that we are going through. Before we go to the second segment though, I want to check with Benson. Do you feel there is anything that we should celebrate? I really want you to talk about what we can celebrate more than anything to frown about, because Winnie has already talked about everything to frown about. So Benson, what should Ugandans celebrate?
I think, you know, Arthur, I've grown up under very difficult conditions, born under difficult situations in 1961. At the time, the country was grappling with many things. I've always grown as an optimist. I compare Uganda. I want to celebrate Uganda as my country. It's my identity. If I have to travel anywhere, despite what she's going through, we celebrate the birth of our children. They may be raped. Anything can happen to them. That is another issue. But I think for now, we have something to struggle for. We have something to discuss. We have something to fight for. And that is our country. And that's what I celebrate. It could be raped now. Somebody once said that the country has gone to the dogs. I don't agree. It is the dogs that have gone to the country. And if that is the notion, then we can get rid of the dogs. But what I can celebrate now is a young country that has born, that has given me my identity, that has given me my essence of existence, that has given me my location on African continent and the globe. And I think, Arthur, that is what we can celebrate. Whether it is whatever that baby, that small country, that precious gift God has given us as a nation. Because somewhere in the Bible, God says, I will give you a nation to celebrate. Somewhere it says, I think in one of the books, he says he rewards even those who fight for the baby, who stand for their nation. So, and I think let us celebrate Uganda. Let us celebrate this identity of ours. It is a gift, first of all, it is a gift from God. And secondly, it is something, if we fight for it, that can earn us a blessing. Whether it is being raped now, we shall discuss in the next segment.
Thank you very, very much, Benson. We all carry passports. We should be proud. National ID and passports, it tells us who you are. We are somewhere on the map of the world. There is something to be proud about. I have seen Winnie is very much laughing in the background, but she does know that what Benson has said is truth, like we always hear from people from the East, the wise women and men from the East. So thank you very much, Benson. Let me just check in with Fred Muhumuza. If Fred is in, is there anything you want to add to this question about celebration and frowning before we move to the second segment?
Yeah, thank you, Arthur. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the first thing to celebrate is that we are alive and are able to talk and have a conversation on this and see the era of technology allowing us to crisscross the borders. Gone are the days when you needed a passport to have a global conversation of this nature. So being able to tap into those is something worth celebrating. I'm itching really to write an article on how many days or how many years Uganda has, knowing that our life expectancy is close to where we are. So really, are we approaching our life expectancy deadline as a country now that we're 59? So should we be celebrating we're 59 when our life expectancy is around 62, 64? That puts us to a few years before we die off as a country. But we also know there are Ugandans who have gone beyond even the prescribed or recommended years in the Bible, the 70 years. So we're also hopeful that we might live to become octogenarians and go even beyond into the 90s. But how do we get there? While the economists kept pushing for increasing life expectancy, the conversation between economists and health practitioners introduced a concept of quality of life. What is the quality of life that you're actually adding to yourself? I think this conversation is about that. Can we guarantee that the Ugandan who will live to see our 65th celebration of independence and one on 70th will not be going through this conversation we are having, but possibly celebrating that differently, and that the word celebration will actually apply. So I do not know whether we are celebrating 59 years of independence or we are marking 59 years of independence. This is really the conversation we need to have. For some, it's a celebration. For many, it is simply marking.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fred. I think we lost you a bit. Your screen is frozen at the moment, but the debate about marking, celebrating, commemorating, we have to be very careful. I think when we were looking at the words for this poster with CCG, we said commemorating, because we knew that Andrew Karamaji might tell us there is nothing to celebrate. So we are really commemorating something. So let's move with that. So we are going to go to the second segment now. And this is really a segment where each of the panel members are really going to be encouraged to read a specific text. Please, it should not be more than more than 1 minute of reading that text in the report and speaking to it. So why does this resonate with you? Why is it important? So we are really trying to disseminate the messages that are in this particular report by challenging each and every panel member to just speak to sections that most resonated with them. And we are going to start with Andrew Karamaji, but before we do that, let me just try to see if I can get some members from the audience. I can see Henry Nixon Ogwal is here, Isaac Opolot, James Ameda, Sisi Kagava. Not heard from Sisi in a long time, at least me, who doesn't live in Uganda at the moment. So Sisi, can I just invite you to tell us the one thing you want us to celebrate and commemorate tomorrow? Sisi, is the audience able to join and speak? CCG, I'm just checking, because I see a list here of attendees and panelists. I hope that attendees have the opportunities to speak, just to confirm. Is that the case? Sisi, yes, I can see you coming on. Unmute. We want to see you.
Okay. No, I don't have a video, so I don't even know that you're going to see me. Because again, there's no provision for video on my side.
Go ahead,
Hello.
We can hear you at least.
Okay. The topic is rather interesting. I think on my side, if we're to celebrate, maybe I would talk of the institutional framework that we've seen being developed over time, probably to fight corruption. We've seen quite a number of laws that have been put in place. The only challenge or the clawback has been a failure to enforce the laws, but in as far as putting in place, because if you're to go back and look at the time when you got our independence, we didn't really have as very many laws as we have, especially the ones of fighting corruption. The only challenge, of course, that the same government has made some of those laws redundant and also made some of the institutions somewhat redundant in as far as accomplishing their mandate, because we know the appointment process of the respective people that head these institutions. So you realize that in most cases, they're not as independent as they are supposed to be. So in as far as looking at institutions and celebrating how far we've come as a country to fight corruption, I think we still have a long way to go. Thank you, Arthur.
All right, thank you very much. Nice to hear from you, CC. I am going to call upon Brian Geoffrey Chanwat. I will not explain what Chanwat means. That is my tribesmate, but Winnie, this is your assignment to understand what that name means. But Brian, anything you can celebrate, tell us about tomorrow. Brian, wherever you are, just come in.
Okay.
Yes, Brian.
Yes, Arthur. Thank you so much. I hope I can be heard.
Yes, now we can.
Yes, okay, great. Sorry about my name, but back to Uganda. I think from where we are coming, it would be very mean to say that we have not achieved a lot, but even that whatever we have achieved has been basically more of a struggle. So in my opinion, I would say that we are on course, and maybe if we look at, we reflect back on from where we are coming from, I think it would be important that we look at the positive side of it all.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Arthur.
All right, thanks a lot, Brian and Sisi. I think they have balanced a bit what we've also heard from the panelists. So it's my style that I just mix up people. So if you are on this call and your name is appearing, I am just going to call you at any point. So be ready and attentive. But for now, we move on to Andrew. So Andrew, when you looked at this particular report, what resonated with you? Can you just read us briefly what that text is? Tell us the page, read a few lines of the text and speak to it, why this matters for you. So over to you, Andrew. And after Andrew, we are going to go to Winnie.
Thank you, Arthur. I was struck long paper, but please, the audience, do not feel threatened by the 41 pages. It's actually fantastic reading. And under page 16 is a section that continues from a subheading titled Reimagining a New Uganda. And under those, sub-article C talks about resetting the constitutional framework of Uganda. I found that intriguing on a couple of levels. Immediately, of course, because we've been through a couple of constitutions as a country, and the 95 Constitution is hailed near and far as a model template, as a model testament for how to organize a country in terms of administration. Yet, a few years into our constitution is still a young woman or a young man. It's barely 30 years old. But we have seen fantastic theorizations and analysis by people like Kalundi Serumaga, who compellingly show that our constitution, far from being a tool for equitable administration and management of the legislature, executive, and judiciary, things that have plagued our past, that far from being that tool, it is actually a tool that has created an imperial presidency that has reinvented the extractive and violent state that we inherited from our colonial masters. But more importantly, that the constitution we have today, as celebrated as it is, has enabled the creation of a patronage system, which over time has led us to the place that we now find ourselves in. And the intrigue for me is, how else then should we rejig our constitutional order in a way that fits and resolves these challenges? For those who are interested in reading further, the paper is titled Death by Ink. Death by Ink. It's by Kalundi Serumaga and is freely available online. And so, insofar as these reforms are concerned, which is what my conclusion will be, is that I think we should think of constitutional reform not just in terms of the text of the law, but also in terms of the culture of Uganda. The culture of overtaking people because you are driving a government vehicle. The culture of throwing people off land because you have guns. The culture of misuse of power. We need to tame the gun, because it appears to me that whether we adopt a federal system, whether we adopt a unitary system, which is what we're currently using, if our political culture is not reflective of the reforms that we seek, if our behavior as a polity does not reflect these changes, amendments to the constitution to reflect a new style of governance, whether parliamentary system, presidential, or whatever else there is, will not be effective. That's the section that struck me. And it would be great to hear what people like Professor Sempebwa, who played a major role in writing our current constitution, would have to say about the question of our political culture. Thank you, Arthur.
Okay, I seem to have lost Andrew. Andrew, yeah, are you closing now?
He has closed.
Okay.
I think you lost me, Arthur, but just for your benefit, I was really arguing that the architecture of our constitution should reflect the political culture of the country. Because it's apparent that for the 3 or 4 constitutions we've had since independence, amendments just to the text of the law, article this, article that, article this, article that, have not in fact reformed our political order. We still have, in many ways, a culture of unconstitutionalism, despite having constitutions.
Great. Great. So thank you very, very much, Andrew. So in the printed document that I have, I think you are speaking to resetting the constitutional framework. And I think you stress an important point that Peter already also highlighted earlier, that culture is so significant. So the constitutional context sits somewhere. So if whatever constitutional framework you have, no matter how progressive it is, if it sits in a problematic political culture, that constitution will either be amended or it will struggle to live to the aspirations that it articulates on paper. So Andrew, thanks for that. Kindly send us a link to this particular paper that you talked about, which is, death by ink, by a pen or something.
By ink, how Uganda's constitution has broken the country. I'm sharing it in the chat now.
Great, share it on the chat. So let's move on to Winnie. So Winnie, this is not the first time you're looking at this paper. You looked at it several months ago. So can you read for us which text in this particular paper resonated most with you and why? Winnie, over to you. Winnie, are you there? I can see Winnie here with the flag.
Yes, you hear me?
Great.
Yeah,
great,
now
great.
I was impressed by and intrigued by the title, Rebuilding the Conscience of Our People and Society, on page 24. And I just want to read a few intros of that particular title, where we say that we cannot doubt Uganda's inherent human potential to do good, to be fair, and to make the right choices for us as individuals and for the collective good of our society and nation. We have been better in the past as a country and as a people. And so despite the general breakdown and brokenness of our society today, there remains shining lights of hope in the public, the private and civic sectors of our country. I was touched by this heading, and I still believe that even when we talk about transition from Museveni to another leader, as long as we have not touched the conscience, the moral conscience of our people, we have not built the moral fabric of our society, yes, we may have a transition from one man to another, or from one woman to another, but the ills this man has inculcated into the culture of our people may continue even in the next leadership, to the extent that the thieves will be the same thieves in government, the liars will still be the same liars in government. And therefore, when I went deep to look at the basic standards and the pathways on under the same title, now on page 27, where you were enumerating the standards that we should look at as a people: God-fearing, hard work, equity and justice, moral uprightness, tolerance, national solidarity, constitutionalism, discipline. And I looked at all these as good tenets of a society that we used to believe in the past. Marriages were based on how right, how hardworking, how tolerant a family is. And I still believe for us in our culture, marriages were determined in the past by our parents, and they would look at how disciplined is the family. Are they God-fearing? Are they morally upright? Do they reward hard work? Hard work in the past was rewarded. Where did this go? So if we are to talk about transition, let's also see how we talk much about the moral reconstruction. Conscience of our people should be reconstructed to the extent that we all condemn theft, we all condemn the brutality and injustice. We believe in a society that treats human beings equally, irrespective of your race, irrespective of your gender. And then we can get back to what Karamaji was talking about, of constitutionalism. Because even if we bring a constitution with mindsets of some of us who still believe that when you get into the office, it becomes an office of relatives and friends, not necessarily the general public that you are supposed to serve, it will still be a loss. We shall continue frowning, we shall continue mourning, and we shall continue pitying our last hopes of the country. So I'm intrigued by rebuilding the conscience of our people and society.
Fantastic, fantastic. So it's no surprise, Andrew is a lawyer, believes in the Constitution, but now he has said the culture as well. Winnie, a person of values and, you know, the conscience of our people is for Winnie the most important entry point for this change. So all really interesting perspectives. So thanks a lot, Winnie, for drawing our attention to the text that really most resonates with you. Let me move on to Benson. And after Benson, I will go to Mercy before I come back to Fred Muhumuza. So Benson, what text in this particular report resonates the most with you and why?
Arthur, I think to me, what captivated me most was solution of a problem, debunking the security and instability narrative. And let me just read one sentence. The core of Museveni's character and behavior has remained the same. That's page 4. Page 4. Page 4, immediately below the quotation of General Mugisha Muntu. Yeah, it says the core of Museveni's character and behavior has remained the same, but the operating environment has changed. He has responded by calculatedly maneuvering to suit his individual interests. To me, this speaks it all. I am a strong believer and trainer in leadership. I don't think Ugandans have reflected on that. Revolutionaries, outfits, believe in the supremacy of their leader. Everything else is built around him. Even the name of the constitution, even the laws being designed, even the systems, and they believe that to give him leverage, they fuse the system like now in Uganda. In that paper, it says the country is fused, the army is fused with the parliament, parliament is fused with the executive, NRM is fused with what? All that is by design. So unless we understand that, Museveni has shaped the character, the national character of this country. These are the people who believe in the end justifies the means. Anything can be done as long as the outcome is justified. And that's what Ugandans have believed. They hand out the brown envelopes, the handouts has destroyed the people's potential, even to rethink, even to innovate, to solve. You see now the entire political leadership from LOC 5 to MPs, they are now doing what government is supposed to do. They are buying ambulances. They are providing public services. They are doing this. I'm telling you, unless we deal with that character. So to me, that is what amazed me when I look at what is happening in my country, when I look at the way the institutions have been fused, when I look at even the greatest men like, Arthur, what happens to a leader? This Uganda has got, Museveni has got one of the best cabinet in terms of competences. People with a PhD, some of them highly recognized, like Makubuya, and many others. Now, what happens when they join the system? So I think, to me, debunking that and understanding the import of that leadership and how it has shaped the character of this country, the character of public service, like Winnie said, is what is critical in for us coining out the next move.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Benson. Bishop Zach used to remind us all the time that leadership shapes culture. So Andrew talked about culture earlier, Peter talked about culture, but culture is not static. It tends to be shaped by people. So if you are an executive director of an organization and you are a thief, you are forging receipts, people who are, seeing you do that will simply copy. And before you know, the entire culture has changed in the organization. So I think Benson is intrigued by the description of the leader that has held forth more than all the other 9 combined since we got independence. We need to learn something from the mindset of the person. So thanks a lot for drawing our attention to that. So let's move quickly to Mercy now. So Mercy, which section, which text, which argument, which message really resonated with you and why?
Thank you, Arthur. I think the text that resonated with me most is on page 5. It's the second paragraph, and I'll just read it. We believe that while leadership change for Uganda is desirable and urgent, it is only part of a larger jigsaw that needs a careful and deliberate thought process. So here I believe that, first of all, the drafters of this paper do acknowledge the urgency and the importance of change, especially in leadership. But also, most importantly, they shift our mind to the thought that whereas this is urgent, it is part of a larger process. And of course, when you go further, especially on page 15, where there's a discussion around the transition agenda, you start to understand the relevance of this particular text. That even as we discuss a transition agenda, it is very important for us to look at this holistically. And in this case, we have to consider very many factors that contribute to what a transition should look like. And I think this is where, as a country, we've gotten it wrong. A lot of our focus has been on change of leadership. So we are focusing on an individual and getting them out of the system, which I must say is very important for us as a country. But then we must acknowledge the fact that this individual is part of a system that has been existing for the past 36 years. And so this means that there are so many layers of this system that will need to be challenged if we must attain a meaningful transition. And I can say, Arthur and everybody on this space, that for a very long time, especially coming from this election cycle, there's so many people that became very hopeless, that became very exhausted. There's been a lot of election fatigue, and for a moment, conversations around good governance died out just because of the frustration from the result of those elections. And that goes to tell how much people desire change, but they're just looking at change at the topmost layer. That is removal of somebody from a leadership position, but ignoring the larger conversation about what would this transition mean for us? What is the quality of leadership we're looking for? What are these fabrics of this system that we need to challenge if we must attain a meaningful transition? And for me, I believe that why this resonated a lot with me is that I desire for us to have a very deep conversation about this system, about the different components of this transition, and how each one of us plays a role. That I do not need to run for a political office to contribute to this transition. That where I am seated, whether I in the football fraternity or in the CSO sector or in the private sector, that I must find my place. I must find and define my contribution to the greater transition agenda. I must find where it is, because that way I will not depend on whoever is at the political helm for this transition. So if that person fails in that position, I should have contributed to a change, meaningful change at my level. So for us to be able to collectively work towards this transition, we must think beyond the leadership question. We must think about this system and challenging and changing it from all the layers that manifest in our daily living. So I think for me, that is the text that resonated a lot for me, and it's the bedrock of this paper, that this paper opens our mind to a deeper reflection of what transition means for Uganda, and it couldn't be more timely than now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much, Mercy. Without any further ado, of course, Mercy has articulated the fact that we need to look beyond individuals. Somewhere in the paper, we list the number of presidents that Uganda has had since independence. The question is, why do we come back to the statement Andrew made earlier that the more we change, the more we remain the same? So there is something about the structural issues that we will need to deal with, the systemic issues that transcend an individual. So beyond the important understanding that Benson has made about understanding the mindset and the machinery, the mindset of the person, I think what Mercy is also telling us is the system and the machinery that has been set up. So that tomorrow when Sarah is the president of the Republic of Uganda, I mean Sarah Bireete, she must dismantle the system. Otherwise, we shall be on the street trying to get rid of Sarah in the same way in which some people are chasing a certain Muzei at the moment. So let me then move on to Muhumuza before I open up to the audience to just share with us also their perspectives of what they have heard as well as what they have read. So Fred, when you go through this paper, which section, which element resonates with you and speaks to your understanding of where Uganda is at the moment and what needs to change? Over to you, Fred.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you. I think I have a statement that really caught my eye and I think runs through the thread of the entire document. It's on page 2, somewhere we are saying that many change seekers are focusing on leadership change as an end, not what next. And I think that also speaks to when people are talking about leadership change. I think Mr. Museveni has been around so long that is now synonymous with leadership, that even as we say leadership change, people are really talking of changing Museveni to whatever next. So that kind of thinking has run through the whole discussion, that even when you read the report, there is where it brings up the character of Mr. Museveni, which he has fused onto the institution that he's been using to, he still uses to lead the country. That most people may think that just the day Mr. Museveni leaves, all these institutional dynamics would move away or reconfigure themselves or go away. Now, independently, or speaking about the future of the independence of the country, will require us going beyond that narrative of what next, but how does that change also happen? And I think the book talks about the 3 scenarios, a chaotic one, a planned one, and a combination of the 2. And it seems to give the impression that the chaotic one will emerge because of lack of institutions. Now, it's not true that actually there are no institutions, but because we are discussing this transition agenda quite often by looking at Mr. Museveni, the person, and the institutions out there that should be, which possibly are not there. But they're actually there, the institutions that he himself has created and others, the system possibly has undermined in order to make sure that that transition is not chaotic. So we are lacking a broader framework of looking at options where even what may be chaotic may actually not be chaotic, because there are certain institutions in place that we do not see because they may not be formal, or if they are formal, they operate informally, but they are there to ensure that there will not be chaos during that transition. So I thought that came up very well, and I would have sneaked in another phrase, but it has already been picked up, which talked of the center of Uganda's future, a need to rediscover. I don't know whether it is the word to rediscover or actually to discover. We possibly have never discovered ourselves so that we can rediscover ourselves. We seem to be not at a place where we have ever found ourselves as Uganda since we are lumped together by the colonial regimes, the northern tribes, the southern tribes, but even now the southern tribes, are they southern? Are they actually lumped up in this southern space? And there are those lumped up into the northern space. Being around for some time, I have seen a time when we were in the 80s and it was northerners versus southerners. And then when the NRA took power, the Southerners felt, yeah, we also now can rule. Then quickly the Southerners realized, no, it was a Western affair. It wasn't an entire Southern affair. These were Westerners ruling the country. Then the Westerners also realized and they said, no, it's not actually Westerners, it's Ibanyankore. Before we knew it, it had zeroed down on a certain tribe. These are the Bahima clan. Now it is a family thing. So are we rediscovering ourselves? Have we ever discovered ourselves anyway? Maybe that space is still continuing, even as we talk about independent Uganda. Is it Uganda that we know? Or is it tribes or families or clans or individuals after here being an individual that is going to moderate us? Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Muhumuza. I am glad you spoke before Andrew, because Andrew would have built on that point about whether we really exist in the first place. So thank you very much, panel members. I think what we've done through this segment was to really enable us to go into the paper, because it's not a paper that has been shared widely yet. So it was a good opportunity for us to just reflect on some of the text that is in the paper itself. So we left with 40 minutes, and I really would want to dedicate quite a bit of that. Fortunately, there are not so many people online, so maybe we can get as many comments and reflections as possible. So what I would suggest now is open this up to the wider audience beyond the panelists and the organizers, and just see if anyone has comments, questions, reflections to also share on this big conversation that we are having around the 5 think pieces that Peter talked about earlier. Political transition questions, understanding the man and his machinery, rebuilding the conscience of our nation, building an economy that works for everybody, and of course, looking at Uganda in a larger geopolitical context. So you can just raise your hand or put a message on the text and speak. So we will have the next 20 minutes just reflecting on what comes out from the audience before we move towards the last segment of our conversation today. So let me see if there is anybody. I understand that there might be some limitations for people to raise their hand or whatever. So our CCG colleagues will help if there is any technical difficulty for participants to put up their hands. Maybe I can just pick on people as well if I don't see hands coming up. But anybody has anything to intervene from the audience, just from what you've heard, what you have read, and your own reflections? This is the moment for the next 20 minutes. I can see there is a Q&A here. Is it possible to share your presentation in our emails? I think CCG will do that. Thank you very much. Frank is the one who sent that message. We will certainly do that if you have registered your email as part of this webinar. Any other questions, comments? I can see here, Charles Mulozi is online, Jude Mugabe. Let's hear from Charles, and then Jen Nalunga, if you're there. I'm just trying to balance gender, but also other diversities. So Charles first, and then Jen, if you are online. Charles, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arthur, and the panelists. Thinks you've made justice to this topic. It's quite a difficult time to reflect on independence. 59 years of independence. I've always reflected of a human being who is 59. At 59, you cannot walk. At 59, there's someone out to feed you. And 59, almost everything about you is guided by someone else. It's a difficult moment, very, very difficult moment. So there's a lot to celebrate, as other colleagues have stated. For me, there's a lot to mourn from this country at 59. We're talking at the time when our education system is closed. We are celebrating 59th at the time when our health system is completely collapsed. We are talking at 59 when our debt burden has moved to the level we cannot control. We are talking at 59th at the time when we talk about a justice system which is dysfunctional, a justice system that does not promote justice itself. So it's a crossroad. We are on the crossroad, and I'm happy with the level of intellectual conversation that has happened. And I think it is time, as we clock 59, we are left with, if it is human being, you're left with almost 10 years to make a change that we want to see, so that you don't even have the time because it's a crisis now. So we need to have a deeper conversation as citizens of this country, a deeper conversation that resonates with the economy and resonates with human beings. It's quite difficult that at 59 citizens get lost and nobody can account for them. So for me, as we celebrate this, we need to come and increase the level at which we need to hold our political leaders accountable. We need to look at the time that what do we need? For long, our political leaders have defined what is good for us. So as we start 59 years independence, we need to say, what do we need from our leaders? We need to raise the bar so high to the extent that our leaders need to conform to what citizens feel is the right thing, rather than political leaders defining, because it has failed. Since independence, we have given too much power to political leaders. It's the time we need to start reflecting about our constitution. It's the time we need to reflect in terms of what country we want to have. So for me, it's a good conversation. And how do we have this conversation moving to the general citizen? And if we cannot have that, we are still going to keep moving, as what Arthur used to say, that driving on a runabout. It is quite difficult that there is no conversation at citizen level, the question of political debates in this country. Can we have a national debate? This is a conversation that has been happening. How can we account for the past? And then how can we shape the future? So these are the conversations Arthur and colleagues and my brother, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, is a conversation we need to take at all spectrum of life, social, economic, political. It's quite difficult. At 59 years, I think it's the worst independence I'm going to celebrate, when there's nothing in terms of the political leadership, cultural leadership, religious leadership, everything has been crushed. So if everything has been crushed, the spirit of the citizen has been crushed, the spirit to organize has been crushed, the spirit to hold leaders have been crushed, then there's a big crisis ahead of us that we need to reflect. But it's a great moment to start from. But I hope from here, the spirit and the conversation take a new dimension and a new direction. Thank you so much, Arthur.
Thank you very much, Charles. I can see that Martin's hand is up, but Charles does remind us that, 59 years, if Uganda was a human being, we would already start struggling to, do certain things. So we don't have much time. Those of us who are still walking the paths and streets of Uganda, climbing Uganda's trees, you don't have much time to make a big difference for your country before you expire. I think that's the challenge that Mulozi is putting for us. So I can see Martin's hand up, but before I go to Martin, I had mentioned Jane's name earlier. Jane Nalunga, are you online still? Yes, Jane.
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Hello?
With a comment, reflection.
Okay, thank you so much, Arthur. And thank you so much, comrades who are participating in this very, very important webinar. My comment goes to the issue of the economy. That we need to harness our politics, our political energies, also to ensure that people have, live in dignity. Because, living in dignity is also about the political environment, but also about the socio-economic. When you look at the COVID pandemic, a number of people, so many people have fallen far below the poverty line. And I see a number of strategies like the Polish model being floated, being put on table, that they are, such endeavors will help us to get out of poverty. But we need to interrogate those approaches, because some of them are more political than economic. So as we move forward, we are looking at overhauling the political setup, but I think we also need to look at the economic side also. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot, Jen. I think Muhumuza, this is an area that we will come back to you later as well. How do we build an economy that works for everybody? There is a think piece about this particular topic that Jen has drawn our attention to in the paper itself. So it's somewhere in the paper. So have an opportunity to, go through it as well, because there are some proposals there about what we could do with our economy, because like Jen has said, it's not just focusing on the politics, but also the economic, the structural economic conditions sometimes also shape the nature of our politics. So Martin's hand has been up. So let me give an opportunity to Martin. Please speak. Martin, over to you. You can unmute and speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to the researchers and the author specifically of this of the paper. I've just been able to read the 7-pager that was put in the chat, and he makes a very interesting and serious points there. I want to, of course, to comment on what is has come out predominantly in that paper is the fusion of the very many arms of government, and also the departments. It's unfortunate that 59 years down the road, we are still dealing with the basics, of a democratic society, of a democratic state. Perhaps in the next years, as citizens, we could, and this is me going into the cliche, we could build civic consciousness to be a citizenry that demands, a citizenry that cannot be taken for granted, and that begins at the horizontal level, the grassroots level, at family level. How do we, as parents, bring up our children? Is it through fear? Like the author notes, that our state was brought together so much through fear and coercion from the colonialists, which continued also with the regimes that followed. At home, are we, the children, leading them through the fear of a father who comes and no one is supposed to question him when he's behaving in ways that are dangerous? At university, are professors and lecturers and questionable? There's at various institutions in secondary schools. Is that the culture that we are inculcating into people? Even civil society leaders, are you the kind of leader where when you put at the gate, all your employees scatter for their lives to their cubicles because they cannot be free with you? So the civic consciousness of people that they can stand up to, we can all stand up to injustice, that we can all speak our truths, that we can all own, issues in this country, I think will go very far in addressing the challenges that bedevil us. Let it be in the religious sector. Are we only receiving what our preachers tell us at the pulpit? Are we also standing up to question the narratives that are being peddled, which narratives from colonial and now more neo-colonial? So for me, what is important at this time and as a young person is to build civic consciousness. It never ends, and it has to continue in a strategic way and a deliberate way for all of us. So, and like Winnie said, we can never lose hope in believing in the ability of Ugandans. So it's of Ugandans. It's a mixture for me, but also it's a moment of hope that once we build civic consciousness, I think the next 20 years, Uganda can be somewhere, at least in real and meaningful independence. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. In the next 10 minutes, we shall be transitioning back to the panel to really ask the question, okay, if we are to start taking advantage of the little time that we have, Mulozi told us we don't have much time. What kinds of narratives need to shift by Ugandans and for Ugandans, you know, in the next few years? But that is something we shall come back to the panelists about, in addition to them having the opportunity to just reflect back on any comments that would have emerged from the audience. But we still do have a few more minutes, maybe 10 minutes for further reflections from the audience. So I can see here lots of people that have signed in and listening. I have seen my OB, Isaac Ntuju. Isaac, do you want to say something? Isaac? Or are you just listening and can't speak? Because that's also possible. Okay, maybe Isaac is unable. Oh, Isaac, you're coming on. Yes, over to you, Isaac. We can see your speaker is highlighting, but we can't hear you. So you have muted again, Isaac, unmute yourself. So we hear you.
Yes, hello, Arthur.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. I've come in a bit late, I apologize, but yeah.
So any reflections from you want to share about this paper or the discussions that we are having? We are asking basically the question, at 59 years, is it time to change a narrative about Uganda if we are to deliver prosperity? If you have any comments and reflections in that line, feel free to share. There is also Stella Obel. It's been a long time. Stella, do you want to come in now? Any reflections from your end, Stella? I remember Stella from them days. I hope Tororo is treating you well. I'm suspecting you're the person I know, but Stella, any comments from your end? Stella is muted, so let me check on somebody else. Nixon has been here since we started. Nixon, any reflections from you?
Hello, thank you, Arthur and colleagues. I don't know whether you hear me.
Yes,
I'm using a small phone from a small village. I'm sorry that I'm not in very good health. Uganda at 59 is at a very critical time when I think about the Constitution and its implication. We are at a time when the civic competence of Ugandans is very low. This is not what we expected the 1995 Constitution to deliver. The Ugandans of the 1961 to 62 that actually had a drive that delivered the independence, they were much more civically aware and competent than now. I'm so sad to note that when I was growing up, even during Amin's regime, there was much more teaching of civics that would teach about nationalism, the roles of the different arms of government. And we would feel government right from the parish, the village chief. That's why you could not sell a government drug. Even during Amin's regime, you could feel that you are part of a nation. As I was growing towards the 80s, when you would see, and Arthur, your father was a headmaster by that time with a Tata lorry in his school. We would see a Tata lorry with UE and you say, that is our vehicle. Every child in primary would see the Uganda, any vehicle with a UE to be theirs. We would feel that ownership, we would feel that belonging. Not anymore. So we are actually at such a time, at such a time that I cry for my country, how leaders have been very selfish to write a constitution that, in the words of Seromaga, I've just read the 7-pager, he ends in a very painful way. He ends in a painful way of saying Uganda is back to square one, if not zero, if they don't mean the same thing. And it is from a narrative that the 1995 Constitution did not consider the history of this country. By the way, mark him and understand him. The Constitution actually states many times that having understood our history, that is just a statement. It did not put in place the representative structures that works for this country. So that means it did not understand the history, our history. That's one. Two, I also want to state that we have failed to come up with the ethical values that runs a Ugandan. We have some draft somewhere, but it's not known by anybody. Then the principles that would make us nationalists is not in any one of us. We just share our own personal ideas. Even us who are in this very forum right now, we are not driven by the same principles, and no leaders come up to promote that. So this, I would want to say, if we really take it serious, then there is hope if we all understand these issues. But if we remain corrupted, thinking about how to use the wording of the Constitution to do the bad things other leaders have done before, even worse, then Uganda is at a crossroad. Thank you, Arthur and colleagues.
Thank you very much, Nixon. I'm sorry about your health situation. If I knew, I wouldn't have burdened you very much, but really sorry, I have no regrets, because you have really spoken to the soul and the heart of one of the areas that actually Winnie also talked about, rebuilding the conscience of our people and society. So those who have this paper, on page 26, we talk about pathways out of the quagmire that we have found ourselves in, rebuilding our conscience by, rewarding values in our homes, schools, in our politics, and also conducting public office. Exemplary leadership is very, very crucial. Affirm certain values in our constitution and subsidiary laws. Knowing that leadership at all levels shapes culture and behavior. So there are some suggestions that have been provided in addition to the values that that Winnie also talked about earlier. So I would invite those who are, impressed by the perspective that Nixon has shared to look at page 26, 27, and 28 of the paper. So I just randomly picked on Patricia, Sitaraya, and Tali. So if Patricia, you are on, this is a moment for you to come in before we get back to the panelists. So Patricia, you're on mute if you're speaking. Okay, maybe Patricia is having challenges unmuting herself. Can we go to Tali? Wikirize, yes, Tali. Tali, are you speaking? We can't hear you. Okay, it appears Tali and Patricia are having some challenges, so I would encourage you to post your comment, Tali, and unless Patricia, you want to try again. Okay, I think let's move on, and we are coming back to the panel now. And I want us, as we go towards wrapping up this particular segment in 10 minutes, we need to be wrapping up before I invite Sarah Bireete to give us some closing remarks at exactly 5 minutes to the top of the hour. So in 1 minute or two, Fred Muhumuza, I would like you to speak to one of the comments that came from Jen Nalunga as well, that sometimes we focus a lot on politics and we, forget the economics of politics, So those of you who do a lot of political economy analysis, I think you are able to help us connect these two. But after responding to that, any reflection in that line, Fred, I would like you to give some closing remarks that speak to the point. If we want to see Uganda, 40 years from now, Uganda will be a century old, 100 years. If we dream of not just a country that is a shining light, a country of equal opportunity and prosperity, Uganda at 100, what are the kinds of things that we need to start changing now? If you could just help us, reflect on the things we need to change now for Uganda to shine in 100 years' time. If we are to have that projection, some of us will not be around, but I'm sure Mercy and Karamaji will be around to tell us the story of what Uganda will look like 100 years of independence. So over to you, Fred, as we move towards winding up. And after Fred, we will go to Winnie, to Benson, and then Andrew, and finally Mercy. So over to you, Fred.
Thank you, Arthur. I think the message is actually on page 26 of this book, that there is no easy pathway out of this situation and no quick fix. We have to create a new culture in our politics and the way society is governed. That for me gives the summary of the highlights of things we need to do. Really creating a new culture of our politics, and that culture should not just be politics of who succeeds, who is ruling, what benefits are they getting, but the politics that is about the people, the politics that speaks to the economy, the politics that speaks to the normal lives of individuals, that our real focus is on the personalities that are called Ugandans, that they will be proud to be called Ugandans. They will be happy to be where they are, and they will be confident to bring forth a life, a boy and a girl to get married, looking forward to producing a child, who will live in conditions that are better than their own. Because right now there is a debate on whether our conditions are better than the ones our forefathers were in. It's sad that we can even have such a comparison to say were the 60s, were the 50s, and the 70s better than where we are. That should not even have been a debate. So it's my prayer that the culture we create, the politics we create, we really make sure that 20 years as we work into the 200, 100 years, 20 years from now, 2040, 2030s, the generation there will really not even be daring to compare with where we are today, because already within 20 years, we will have transformed that. It's going to take institutions getting back into the foreplay of our journey to that level, not individuals. There will be institutions, there will be individuals committed to institutional leadership. The constitution will be a constitution that is referred to and utilized. Right now, I've read an article by, I think, Professor Kabumba, where he says it's just a document, and we think it is just a document. Can the constitution be that supreme law of the land? How do we need to do that? It's going to take us as individuals committed to this, but also knowing where we are. Ugandans are not about to be Germans. Ugandans are not about to be Swedish. Even as we vote, our democracy is within a very fragile context of both society. We have people who have really not gone to school. You can't exclude them like Americans did to allow some people to begin voting just 40 years ago. This is where we are, that even when you call an election, don't expect it to turn up like the one in Germany or the one in the US. You still have societies that are influenced by a bar of soap, a pack of salt, some 5,000 shillings. That is where we are. How do we get from there to where we desire to be? That, for me, understanding the current context is going to be critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Fred, for those parting shots. So over to you, Winnie. What needs to start changing now for Uganda at 100 to be a shining nation and not just a collection of tribes in a geographic definition? Yes.
Thank you so much, Arthur. And I think the framers of our constitution, the 1995 constitution as amended, were so fast in picturing or drawing a picture of the Uganda that we want. By looking back at the past, and they were saying being aware of our past where we have had transitions of government, I would call them transitions that were chaotic and could not create a sustainable, could not create a well-designed way of transfer of power from one person to another. They were looking at a situation that can usher us into clean leadership where Ugandans will all be in one accord, irrespective of your gender, irrespective of your tribe and culture, to look at how to progress their country. I also now would like to say that if we are picturing a Uganda 100 years from now, there is a lot we need to learn from this publication on page 15 that is talking about a political transition. And I take it from the aspect that Museveni talked about on his in his first inaugural speech, where he said that the problem of Africa in general and Uganda in particular is not the people, but leaders who want to overstay in power. And I also go back to what was noted, I think, under 21 in the same document, where the team narrated that the quest for leadership change and political transition cannot be overemphasized. Change will happen in Uganda. On that, there is no doubt. However, the quality and means of change matters if we are to break away from previous cycles of violence and revenge. And indeed, I can say that if the economy is to be transformed, if the mindsets of our people are to change, and if our cultures and traditions are to be reshaped, there is nowhere where we can get that until we change the leadership of the country. Because like you say, Bishop Zakaniringi precisely would put it, that leadership shapes culture. So the question of good leaders, transformative leaders, value-based leaders should be the issue that we should be looking at as a people if we are to have our country get into the right trajectory and plan better for Ugandans, where all Ugandans will feel included, where all Ugandans will feel happy and secure to be happy Ugandans, and our Uganda can shine again. Indeed, the Pearl of Africa can shine.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Winnie, for those parting shots. I think you echo what Benson also had already mentioned earlier, which is really about understanding the transformative potential that good leadership can present to our country. So how we get our leaders is something that is very, very critical. Benson, in 1 minute, since we are running out of time, then we will go to Andrew and finally Mercy.
I think, Arthur, to me, we have something to talk about. That is our country, Uganda. We have a gift. I think I just quickly want to mention two things. One is that we need to engage on a drive of unlearning the citizenry, unlearning, redoing, reevaluating the revolutionary talk and claims that have been going around, how it has impacted society, to what extent it has taken us, and the need to link the current situation, what we are going through, like Muloni put it clearly. So I think we need a program of political socialization, linking the current situation to what people are going through, so that we begin to break it up and unlearn from the current narrative. And we have the infrastructure. And definitely I know that the revolutionary outfit is going to be more brutal, more aggressive, combining what they often call the strategy, sabotage, upsets, and blackmail. But we need people who will start a conversation which will help people to unlearn. Secondly, I think we need to build on the old initiatives. The problem with us, we start something, jump away, start something, jump away. We had the Citizen Manifesto, the Citizen Conference, the People Power. Now yesterday, another one was being launched. The youth are getting mixed up. Yesterday, I was training in Morocco, and they were saying, but you are mixing us up. You are not consistent. You are not building on what is coming up. You are not doing this. And of course, that has helped the current situation, the current leadership to build on that weakness. And I think we need to be consistent. Let us build on what is happening. Like Dr. Muhumuza said, a quick fix is not possible, but a gradual process which builds an incremental strategy to help people to unlearn, linking these, building on the current initiatives, I think would be a bigger help. And somebody ready to bail the cat.
Thanks. Thank you very, very much, Benson. And I think Nixon already reminded us also of things we can learn from the past, and the certain value systems that were in place in the 70s and 60s that many people born in the 1980s, like Andrew Karamaji, have no idea. They just have read that Amin was a terrible man and nothing good. So Karamaji, if in 40 years we are to be a different country, what do we need to start shifting in terms of narrative today? You have 1 minute to say that, then another minute for Mercy before we hand over to Sarah.
Great. It's my opinion that every society has two types of intellectuals. You have intellectuals who produce rationalizations, who produce justifications and defenses for the status quo, those who defend what is existing. But you also have intellectuals who challenge dominant narratives and try to create alternative narratives, which often help to transition a society from one step to another. I believe that in their own way, the founding fathers and mothers of this country were progressive intellectuals. And even if you look at other fields, what will be critical for the next 40 years is for people like us who are on this call, whether referred to as intellectuals or otherwise, to speak courage fluently, to exercise the knowledge that we have and put it into practice for the benefit of those who might not know better. I think history will judge us harshly if we are timid and do not exercise the knowledge that we've been fortunate to acquire to transition this society, to lead this society into the transition that we so envisage and aspire to. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Andrew. So it starts with all of us. Mercy, 1 minute, and then we have eaten into Esther's minute, not Esther, but Sarah's minute. So Mercy, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think for me, as a parting shot, we need a moral coalition as Ugandans as we discuss this whole reshaping of the narrative around transition. And this moral coalition starts now. We have a document before us that we need to share with our networks and have deeper discussions. We've been limited by time here, but I believe we all need to take this document outside of this space and have honest discussions, because the quest for democracy is not going to be given to us by anybody but by ourselves. We each need to know that we are going to pay the price for good governance, and we're not going to get it on credit, and time is not on our side. And so it's very important for us to find our place on this tree and start to work towards that. We should not leave it to political parties. We should not leave it to individuals. We must count ourselves as part of the process and embrace every element of this change in our daily lives and in whatever we do. Thank you very much, Arthur.
Great, very inspiring, Mercy and all the panelists. You know, we have a responsibility, so we need to play our part. I think is the message that has been resonated. I will then hand over now to Sarah, the director of CCG, to bring this webinar to a close and thank all of you for attending, but also for participating actively. The conversation has just begun. The paper is now free to be shared, and the discussions will continue in spaces such as CCG, but also elsewhere. Feel free to share this paper with your networks and facilitate conversations out there. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, our dear distinguished panelists, our moderator, and distinguished participants. I wish to congratulate the Uganda Narratives Group for this great work, and the panelists for great delivery of the work in a limited hour, because I think this debate needs a day so that each of the sections in the paper are well dissected and understood by Ugandans, but this is a good beginning. And I wish to enjoin all of us as citizens to carry this debate forward and see how best we can reshape the narratives for a better future. As clearly pointed out by the panelists, 59 years is a long time. And if we have not learned to walk, to feed ourselves, and take care of our well-being, then it's a big challenge, and it's a verdict on all of us as citizens, on the leadership. The fault lines of our independence are clearly known. They start with the manipulation of our constitution right at independence, and how the leaders have conveniently manipulated the constitution whenever it gets in their way, right from the first prime minister, executive prime minister of this country. If you look at the very first amendment of our independence constitution was an amendment to create a ceremonial president in 1963 on our first anniversary of independence. And that amendment was aimed at defeating a court decision that had outlawed the elections for a ceremonial president, where many people thought N.E.D had won. So the contestation, even in our elections, right from the 1961 elections, won by Benedict Chwanuka, whose life we just celebrated last week, and the manipulation by the colonial government to create another government other than a government that won for self-government of Ben Chwanuka. So we started with a fraudulent independent country on the election front, on the constitutional front, on the leadership front, and these fraudulent practices have not given us peace as citizens. So as we reshape the narratives, I think we need also a write-up on the true history of Uganda, true political history of Uganda. What happened in 1961? What happened for the colonial administrators then to force another election in 1962, when all other African countries proceeded to get independence by the leaders that had attained the first self-government ahead of independence? And how can we depart from the deception, the pretense, the manipulations that are still with us, that are stopping us from developing a culture of constitutionalism, that are stopping us from getting honest leadership, that are stopping us from having a honest conversation as citizens, and are stopping us from living our honest lives as a people. Right after independence, we had the constitutional crisis. We had laws that took away citizens' liberties, including the Emergency Powers Act that created for detention without trial. We had controversy in 1985 on bail, where Dr. Bote thought that chief magistrates should not give bail, and the aim was political activists at the time. And we know a judge who gave bail to Semogere, Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere in 1985, had to go underground until the government was overthrown. And today, as we celebrate or mark independence, as Dr. Muhumuza has noted, we mark independence amidst closure of schools, and our children cannot study for 2 years. And we are the only African country where schools are closed. We mark independence where our health systems have been brought on their knees by COVID pandemic. We mark independence where personal liberty and the justice system is being pushed on the wall beyond its institutional and operational challenges by the executive. And we mark independence at a time where we are faced with the challenge of a skyrocketing public debt and increasing poverty. So we have too much borrowing and too much poverty and lack of purchasing power on the side of the citizens. And you even wonder where this money that we are borrowing is going to, when it cannot be reflected in the well-being and lives of the citizens. So it's a very critical moment. And I think it is the right time to make a turn on giving ourselves and our posterity hope and a better future. On this note, I wish to announce that this debate will be uploaded on Civic Space TV tomorrow morning, and we shall continue the engagements on social media, as well as creating further avenues for popularizing this debate and enabling an opportunity for Ugandans to engage in a honest national conversation about the direction of their country. I thank you very much, Arthur, all panelists and the group, the Narratives group. I wish to declare this engagement closed. Thank you.